Hello, welcome to the CCCNews Podcast. I'm Robin. I'm here with Dr. Carolyn Bernal.
Good morning. Afternoon.
Good afternoon. Welcome. So just quick introduction. We'll just quickly introduce you. Dr. Carolyn Bernal has served as Superintendent of North Wasco County School District 21 since July 2021, bringing over 29 years of educational experience. Her career began as K-2 teacher, kindergarten. Right?
Yes.
Followed by roles as principal, dual immersion coordinator, and director of human resources, in no particular order. In the Rio School District in Oxnard, California, you advanced to assistant superintendent,
yes,
right? Focusing on equity, bilingual education, and community engagement. Dr. Bernal holds a doctorate in educational leadership from a joint program between CSU Fresno and CSU Channel Islands at North Wasco. At North Wasco, she emphasizes student well-being, educational excellence, and innovation in the classroom. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thanks
for having me. It's a pleasure.
It's great. I'm so glad you're here.
Yes.
It's awesome. So should we start with a quick recap of the year? Most of us weren't in the schools or around the schools and was still curious about how the year went. Obviously, you know, a lot of kids did a lot of things. And so we're only going to scratch the surface. But if you could, that would be cool.
Yeah. Let's see. We've had a lot of great things happen this year in our schools. And let me talk about student support and well-being. That's one of our primary buckets of work that we're looking at, of talking about student engagement and their well-being. And we know that a lot of our kids are coming to school with a variety of needs, and many of our kids struggling with mental health issues, and or if not directly themselves, but perhaps in their family or their living situation. And as I was looking at a lot of our data around this, we have in our community here, we have a lot of great community partners who are doing a lot of really great work on behalf of our youth. But a lot of us are doing it in silos and not necessarily intertwined with each other. Mm-hmm. So as you know, almost 2 years ago, we lost a student to suicide. It was in November of 2023. And that really, really impacted me hard. And I took that opportunity to link up with a mental health consultant here that does work in the state of Oregon. His name's Joe Leckham, and he has been assisting us in developing what we call the Youth Wellness Community Collaborative. And so we began that this year. We've had 3 meetings this year where we brought together over 30 plus community partners in our community. And we brought them to the table to talk about some different things that we're really struggling with as a school district. One of those being our regular attender data with our kids coming to school on a regular basis, substance abuse and prevention with our kids, mental health, our LGBTQ plus community. We know that's one of our most marginalized student population. They're also one of our student populations that are highest at risk of suicide. And then transportation barriers, like just getting to school, because we connect that with attendance, right? So what we've done is opened up ourselves to these community partners and have said, here's what we're struggling with, and what do you have, or what services do you provide that we can take advantage of to ensure that when we have kids who are struggling, we know what are all the resources that we can offer to our children. So that's one really great thing we've done this year. Also, we have just completed a special education audit in the state of Oregon. If people don't know, school districts are funded at 11%. There's an 11% cap on your special education funding that you receive to service your students with special needs. Wow. North Wasco's student population for special education is 16%.
Oh, wow.
So there's a delta. We're still required to provide the services, and we do, and we put the money towards that to provide the services that those students need. However, when you think about our student population and then the percentage of students with special needs, we really began to examine, like, how do we best serve those students and make sure that we are maximizing our dollars, ensuring that those students with special needs are getting all the services that they need and deserve. So we just completed a special education audit, and we're waiting to receive those results that hopefully have some great recommendations in them for things that we can try to start doing differently to better serve that student population.
Cool. That's a big deficit. I mean, 5% of the funding for all those teachers, things, and needing extra, like genuinely extra people and hands to like really work with students one-on-one, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's not like a solution of getting a bigger bus, right? That's an easy one, right?
No.
You know,
Yeah. And if you think about, well, and we have already begun trying different things. So we have our Structured Learning Center, which is housed at Chenoweth, and then we have several students who are on IEPs, which are their individualized educational plan, that are just in general education, but they just get extra support for certain services that they need based on their disability. And then we established the Learning Resource Center up at Dry Hollow. That's for some of our kids who have higher intensive behavioral needs. And so we're doing a lot of behavioral modification therapy type stuff with them to ensure that they're successful in school. We have Transition 21. So we are required as a school district to provide services to students with special needs until the age of 21. So we have Transition 21 housed at Watonka. So we do have a variety of programming that we offer for special education, but it's we've been struggling a little to really figure out how to best serve all of them. And so that's what the special education audit was about.
That's cool.
Yeah. I think we should celebrate our dual immersion program at Chenoweth Elementary School, which is now in 4th grade, going to move up to 5th grade next year. We just surveyed all of our parents in the dual immersion program, asking them about the expansion to middle school, and gave them a couple options to consider. One would be, would you like us to continue to build a strand of a program at the Dalles Middle School? Or we could consider growing the current program at Chenoweth into a K-8 model that would remain at Chenoweth. Overwhelmingly, the parental response has been they want their kids to stay at Chenoweth and go through 8th grade in the dual immersion program, which is super exciting. Also, our demand for kindergarten is increasing. We have, right now, as we're sitting, we have 45 on the waiting list for dual immersion just for kindergarten. And traditionally, we've only had one class at kindergarten. So now we're talking about the expansion piece of also growing the kindergarten. So we believe this fall we'll be offering 2 kindergarten dual immersion classrooms.
That's exciting.
It's super exciting.
That's great.
And I think it's a great infusion into Chenoweth Elementary School, where they've created this really great culture over there. And if you've ever been to one of their dual immersion nights, they're fun.
Yeah,
fun.
That's really cool.
The kids perform. They bring a lot of great food. So.
Yeah, it's just to open the box for the folks that aren't as maybe versed with the dual immersion, the DLI program. It's as I understand it, there's like there were barriers to children with speaking Spanish in learning just English, certainly, in those early years, especially if your family, if you're you're 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old going to school, and you're just learning English and you're not learning Spanish, but all of your family at home speaks Spanish. You know, there's a potential to kind of create a language barrier there in the homes of people, and I know that there are lots of solutions, DLI being one of them. And so, as I understand it, 50% at in kindergarten level, it's 50-50, right? It's half Spanish. Oh no, maybe it's 90% Spanish, 10% English. And then 1st grade levels goes down 80%, 20, and 70, 30. And obviously it's not an exact science, but it's the curriculum is built that way, right? And so by 5th grade, you're at 50-50, half Spanish, half English.
And 4th and 5th grade becomes 50-50. And then when you get to the middle school model, it's content area. So you choose the content area. So for example, you might do Spanish language arts and Spanish history, but then math and science are in English, or you could flip-flop those, like you can trade them out so that they get the language immersion experience in all the subjects, but you might decide which ones you're teaching when.
Yeah.
So,
and there's cool research behind when you learn a language when you're very young, it creates this ability to perceive and learn more language later on, right?
yes. And a lot of, my daughter's a prime example. She went through preschool dual immersion all the way through 8th grade. In 8th grade, took the AP Spanish test and scored a 5.
Wow.
So she got to waive her language requirement when she got to high school, and which opened up a whole lot of things in her schedule, not having to meet that requirement because it was already done.
Wow.
Which is a goal for us here, that we want our kids, when they get to 8th grade, to be able to take that AP test. And then when they get to high school, their schedules are way more open up and they have a lot more opportunities to dabble in other things.
Yeah.
But the research shows, if you look at a lot of the research behind dual language immersion programs, many times by 4th and 5th grade, students in dual immersion programs are outperforming students who are not in dual immersion programs, which is fascinating research to look at, especially our English learner kids.
Mm-hmm.
They're outperforming their English-only peers in non-DLI programs.
That's so cool.
Yeah. It's really cool research. And we're starting to see that with our own students in the program. So
there's definitely something special about 2 languages as a child early in those formative years, when it's easier for the brain to kind of, or maybe the brain is more spongy in that, in terms of being able to flip between the 2 languages.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
It is.
Thanks for sharing. That's great. That's cool. So this being said, tell me about what the district is working on improving.
Well, as I said, when I think about all of the work that we are working on, I really think about it in kind of 3 big buckets of work: student well-being and engagement, innovation in the classroom. It's like making learning exciting. It's all that hands-on, project-based, not having to have our kids like in a textbook every single day, like making learning fun so they want to be there and they're more engaged in their learning and also taking ownership of their learning. And then educational excellence. We want all of our kids to academically do well. And so when you think about those 3 big buckets of work, there really are like 3 guiding documents that really guide all of this work. One is our 2027 strategic plan, which we established my first year we went through the process. So it came out in 22, 23. We rolled it out. Which means I think we only have a couple of years left. So in about a year, we're going to be going through the whole process again to set the next strategic plan. And then integrated guidance, which integrated guidance is a state required plan that we have to submit, which it has money attached to it. It's all the grant and aid from High School Success, Student Investment Account. There's like 6 different funding sources that stream into that document. So that's a 2-year plan that you're required to submit. And embedded in there are what are called LPGTs, which are longitudinal performance growth targets, which there are 5 by which we're measured: regular attender data, 3rd grade reading proficiency, 9th grade on track, 4-year graduation rates, and 5-year completion rates.
Cool.
And we're required to set targets every year, and then we get measured. So last year, or when we did our 23-25 integrated guidance plan, when the measurements came out last year, we hit 4 out of our 5 longitudinal performance growth targets.
Okay.
The only one we didn't meet was 3rd grade reading proficiency.
Okay.
So we just got done submitting our proposed plan for the 25-27 biennium. And that goes through a whole feedback process with the Oregon Department of Education. So we submitted our plan. They'll give it back to us with feedback, and then we'll make adjustments based on their feedback. And then we submit the final version, and then it will go to the board for approval, hopefully before the end of June.
Cool. It's a lot of stuff between here and the end of June.
Yeah, and that really lines out. We have to identify in their outcomes, what they call outcomes and strategies. So here's the outcomes we're trying to achieve, and then here's all the strategies that we are doing to try to achieve the outcomes.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And then lastly is our intensive program work. So 2 years ago, we were invited. We got a letter and this invitation from the Oregon Department of Education to join the intensive program. And the intensive program, I have a little information just so people can understand what it's about. But
yeah, the governor's working on this, right? And it's part of her accountability bill.
It is part of her accountability package. But it's a state-supported initiative aimed at helping districts implement systemic changes that lead to improved student outcomes. So through this partnership, we receive targeted support, coaching, professional development to build capacity in areas such as equity, instruction, and data-driven decision-making.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
It's a mouthful. So we have what's called, and within this program, you have what's called a stewarding body and an advisory body. So the stewarding body is made up of what they call stewards from the Oregon Department of Education. So like we have a leadership steward, we have a teaching and learning steward, we have a community engagement steward. So these are people that have joined the stewarding body team. And then I'm on the stewarding body. We have a teacher representative, our current vice president of the union, Val Rector's our teaching representative, and then a board member. So that's the stewarding body, and they're the decision makers. And then the advisory body is a much larger body of people. It's about 40, 45 people that are on that. It includes parents, students, community partners, staff. We try to get a wide range of stakeholders who have vested interest in schools. And they are what's called, so they're advisory because they give input on what are called recommendations. And this program also comes with grant and aid. We received a little over $4 million of grant and aid that's spent over 4 years.
Cool.
Yeah. So there's a lot of recommendations that we have pushed through with this program and that we're funding that are all aimed at improving student outcomes. Yeah.
The teachers talked about the professional development so highly in the work session about 4 weeks ago.
Yeah.
They had lots to say about the what they kind of received in those courses, right? In terms of, I can't remember the subject matter specifically, but it was like each teacher that talked about it had the different type of glowing review around the professional development that they got. And it's pretty hard to get professional development in lots of fields, right? Teaching is one of them, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. And we, so like, some of the things that we're doing through with this money. Also, in integrated guidance, there's a component of funding the early literacy dollars. So early literacy dollars combined with some of the intensive program dollars is where we're able to really provide some meaningful professional learning. So some of the things we're doing would be like science of reading training. So we're going to make sure that every K-5 teacher is trained in the science of reading. Because we know that third grade reading, we have to improve our students being proficient as third grade readers. Otherwise, we're continuing to push kids along who can't read and or aren't reading at grade level, which then becomes a struggle for middle school teachers, which then becomes a struggle for high school teachers. We're just perpetuating this problem, which we don't want to do. We want to get our kids reading proficient by third grade so they can be successful for the rest of their career with us here in our schools. So science of reading training, iReady diagnostic training, that's the trimester formative assessments that we're giving. So that's the data that's really interesting to look at because we're seeing a ton of growth in our kids. And, I think it's easy for anyone on the outside who's not necessarily in education to criticize test scores when they come out. But I always try to remind people the test score doesn't tell the whole story. No. You have to look at the in-between data because kids are making growth and they're making significant growth. Like we're seeing kids grow by 2 years in a year. Just monumental jumps.
Yeah. That individualized learning and that ability to see which students are where in that individualized learning is transformative or looks and appears to be transformative from my perspective.
It is. And that's what this work is about, right? It's all transformative work in our schools happening. It's about building systems that support student well-being, that they have a good experience at school, and that they're doing well academically.
Yeah. It's that classroom innovation.
Yes.
Really cool. Yeah. Thank you so much. That was fascinating. Let's go for a quick break and take a breath and we'll be right back. Hey friend, if you're having a tough time right now, you're not alone. Whether you're dealing with stress, mental health challenges, emotional pain, or concerns about alcohol or drug use, there's someone here ready to listen. Just dial or text 988 anytime, day or night. The 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is here for you 24/7, 365 days a year. It's free, it's confidential, and it's available to anyone. Yes, even if you're reaching out for someone else. The counselors in 988 are trained, caring, and judgment-free. They're ready to talk, to listen, and to help you or someone you care about get through a difficult moment. You matter, your story matters, and help is just 3 numbers away. Call, text, or chat 988 anytime, anywhere. Welcome back to everybody. That's sorry, we're just talking about it. It was so fascinating.
Thank you so much.
I'm like, oh my gosh, my brain is full of education, and this is exciting. So, going back to a little bit to the kind of the governor level and the governmental level of this, which is always a push and pull, right? You know, I've often found myself watching situations unfold in the middle school during board sessions where we have state guidance that's kind of coming into clash with the our local way of doing things, right? And it's not a new problem, right? And you folks in the administration are often in the middle of that conversation, right? Taking what the guidance comes down and kind of helping us kind of implement it, work with it, and things like that. And so, but going back to what we were talking about here with the accountability bill that the government, the Tina Kotek, is currently working through and has proposed to the state house. In that, there's this improvement plan includes an intensive program, right? And so what we're seeing is that many school districts may be forced to go into this intensive program. But we have a slightly different story in that. Tell us about what happened in that process.
We do have a different story. So currently in the proposed governor's accountability model, which accountability has just become such a buzzword lately, right? We want accountability.
Yeah. What does that even mean?
Well, here's what I'm here to say. North Wasco is a model for accountability right now because we've been in the intensive program for 2 years. As I said, we were invited 2 years ago to join. We really took our time as we considered, once we were invited, whether we wanted to join or not. We met with the Oregon Department of Education. We wanted to learn more. We wanted to learn why. Why us? Like, why did you choose us? And we wanted to better understand that. We wanted to better understand the money that came with it and how that process worked. We wanted to understand the governance model of it, this stewarding body and this advisory body. So we took quite a bit of time weighing the pros and cons. But in the end, you know, I couldn't fathom like saying no to over $4 million of grant and aid to do great things in our district that would better outcomes to drive better outcomes for our kids. Because that's what it's all about at the end of the day. It's about our kids. So we jumped in feet first, and we're one of 4 districts currently in the state of Oregon in the intensive program. And I do know that several other districts have been invited but have declined. But through the governor's accountability model that she's proposing, so what she's saying is if after 2 years of not making progress towards your longitudinal performance growth targets, school districts will be required to enter into coaching. They'll have coaches that come alongside them. If after 3 years of not making adequate progress, they're required to be in the intensive program. You can't say no. And if after 4 years of not making adequate progress, you have to remain in the intensive program. And also, the Oregon Department of Education gets to determine how 25% of your funding gets spent.
Oh, wow. That's a pretty serious.
That's significant when they're driving how you're spending the money.
Yeah.
With that local control, right?
Yeah.
Well, you're going to lose 25% of that local control.
Yeah.
So, you know, I like to say, like, we are an accountability model because we've been doing it for 2 years. We have been so blessed with the Oregon Department of Education stewards who've come alongside us. They're fantastic people, super knowledgeable in their areas of expertise. And to have external lenses come in and work alongside you and coach you and offer ideas and different perspectives has been extremely invaluable. I can't even say, and I think I speak for my whole cabinet team. Like, everyone has really been pleasantly surprised by this experience.
Yeah.
Some of the things that we've funded out of the intensive program would be, so this year new in our elementary schools, we have what are called culture and climate TOSAs, which are teachers on special assignment. And they're really focusing on the culture and climate and trying to foster a positive educational environment for all kids. But also they're working more directly with the adults in our building. So coaching our adults on how to provide that positive educational experience for kids and build a positive culture and climate within your classroom, within the school, and whatnot.
Yeah.
The other thing we were able to use part of the money for was not attached to the intensive program, but through intensive program, but through a different funding model with some federal dollars, some targeted school improvement dollars, is our youth outreach workers. And that's a collaborative with the next door. But we introduced youth outreach workers into all of our schools this year. And that they are focused on strengthening connections between schools and the community and really aiming to support student engagement and success. And they really are targeting some of our kids who are chronically or severely chronically absent. I don't know how many people know, but when you look at our regular attender data, last year when our targets goals came out, we met our target, which was 62%. But when you take 62% of our student population, that means that over 1,000 of our students do not come to school on a regular basis. And so when you break that down even further, a little over 20% of our kids are what we would call chronically absent. So, and then about 15 to 16% are severely chronically absent. Wow. So regular attendance is measured by the first day of school. It gets measured the first day of school through May 1st. And it's kids who come to school 90% or more of the school days that are available are deemed a regular attender. If they don't come to school more than 90%, then they become what's called chronically absent. So if you think about that, over 1,000 of our kids are not coming to school on a regular basis. Yeah. And when you equate that to student achievement, this is what I was talking about earlier, was like teachers really have an uphill battle. Like we can give them all the tools, all the professional development, all the things to be amazing teachers in the classroom, which we have so many amazing teachers in our schools and in our classrooms who are super dedicated and have a heart for kids. Yeah. But if they're not here, we can't teach them. They can't learn. So it's this kind of uphill battle that we're facing. So that's why we've shifted our focus to trying to improve the experience for kids while at school, the innovation in the classroom, what excites kids and what's going to get them to school every day, what's going to make them want to wake up every morning and be like, I want to be at school. I don't want to miss school. Right?
Yeah, especially if you fall behind for a reason that's not in your control. Early on, it's catching up is such a hard go. I never really caught up, truthfully. In classes I got behind on. And when I spent a couple of days last week at the youth empowerment shelter here in the Dalles, and it was really, really eye opening to talk to those kids about what and young adults what they were going through, and not, we didn't obviously get into it really, which I'm because I'm not their caseworker, but it's fascinating how so much of the time it's an external influence. It's transportation, or it's housing, or it's family, and you've got to look after a little one and family who's because parents are going to school or going to work, or it's something else, and it's easy for us. It's easy to kind of look at those numbers and want to think that all those kids are on Minecraft, but that's not the case, right? The case is actually much more complicated. It's much more broad, and these kids really need touch points, right? They need people engaging with them and walking them through these really difficult things they're going through. And all kids, even if it's less severe than some of those cases I just hypothesized, but we all need hand holding at some point, right? We all need a little bit of help, a little bit of encouragement. And you guys as school there's got to be someone there ready for when that moment occurs, right? And you don't know when the moment's going to occur, but the TOSA sounds like one of the people that's kind of there to work with that, right? There's someone there at school who can notice the kids sitting in the corner and be like, "Hi, how's it going?"
It's a combination, I think, of a lot of things. It's our school counselors, it's our CELAs, which are our social emotional learning assistants. It's our classroom assistants. It's like everyone working in conjunction with one another. But there's this heavy emphasis or focus that we're doing on just like the relationship building piece, right? Ensuring that every kid in the building is connected to an adult. And that goes back to our mission and vision to know every child by name, strength, and need.
Yeah.
Right? We know them. We know what their name is. We know what their needs are, and we know what their strengths are. And then we hone in on that. And we are constantly striving and working to remove barriers for kids and access for families. And we recognize, though, we've got a lot of kids with just a lot of different needs. Yeah. We have a lot of, young children coming in with very neurodivergent. So that's been a whole, I think, learning experience for a lot of the adults in our buildings. Like the children we're seeing come through our schools today are not the children that were 30 years ago. Like not when I was a kindergarten teacher. Yeah. It's very different. So, we as the adults have the responsibility to then, if something's not working, we've got to change what we're doing because the system that we've currently designed is not working for our kids.
Yeah. I'm a child of ADHD, and I spend a lot of time staring against a brick wall outside the classroom, because teachers didn't know how to deal with me. Right. Yeah. And, while it suited the other kids in the classroom because I was less disruptive, I never really caught up. Right. Yeah. And this is the example, right? And so we have to find ways of, that kid's got something going on and like they will respond to this. They won't, we don't need to stand them against the wall to do that, right?
And that part of recognizing what does the kid need. Some kids need just a fidget toy at their desk. Yeah. Some kids need the bouncy chair or seat, right? The bouncy ball instead of a regular hard chair because they can't sit still, but the bouncy chair works. Some kids actually need to get up and walk around the classroom while teaching is happening. And I think traditionally, right, people would think that's such a distraction, but no, it's just what that kids need. It doesn't mean they're not focused, that they're not learning. They just need something a little different. Yeah. And that's the part of trying to unpack it and know the kid and just know what their needs are and meet them where they're at. Yeah. And give them what they need to be successful.
Yeah. And we need the buildings to be able to do that, but that's going to take another minute. So let's take another quick break and then we'll finish on a really, really difficult question around school facilities and school bonds.
Hey, Josh, did you know that we are funded by our readers in large part?
I did know that, but please tell me more.
Yeah, it's our local readers here that make it possible for us to go out and gather news on local businesses and important issues in our community. And so we need people to support local news. Did you know you can make a difference in our community's economy and culture by supporting local journalism? I bet you did. But maybe you out there don't. And so you should visit our Support Us page at CCCNews.com to subscribe to a monthly donation to keep news local and start making a difference in our community today. Again, that's CCCNews.com.
And remember, CCC News is available for everyone and funded by readers.
Hello and welcome back. We are going to enter into a very difficult and fun conversation. Difficult in that there's lots of different elements to come part of this conversation, and fun in that it's fun to imagine a better future for our kids in this district, right? And the conversation is around school buildings, and it's like it's such a piece, right? Like we talk about, like we should be talking about kids and teachers and all these sorts of things. Why are we having conversation about roofs and air conditioning? And, and is there enough electricity in this room to put computers in there? Probably not. So there's lots to go down to this road, and we're in that portion of the year where we're lucky that it's cool right now. There are some years in May that it gets so stiflingly hot, as we all know. And I've measured the temperature in the room in those hot days. I'm in the high school, and they get up to 92, 91 in the health room above the gym, which has now been helped by the seismic grants and stuff that you've got. But so we obviously, the bond failed a couple of years ago. Let's not get too deep into the weeds here. Tell me about where we are now and what's coming.
Yeah. So 2 years ago, we attempted and we took another attempt at a bond, and unfortunately it didn't pass, but we did celebrate that we closed the gap over the 2018 bond. Like we got more people to say yes, which was great, but not enough to pass it. I think so. From there, like we obviously hit the pause button, and we did. It's funny because people are like, well, there was never any like debrief or anything. Well, yes, there was actually. We did do a debrief after it. We actually invited anybody from the community to come and tell us, and give us their feedback. In fact, I remember Director Richardson was like visually mapping the whole thing. Like we have all of those artifacts from it. So there was opportunity for people to give feedback. We also did a survey. So we collected feedback in a variety of ways, and there was lots of different reasons, but where we're at now is we are reassessing how we want to move forward. Obviously, we've kind of slowed down because we're going to have some changes in board members and stuff. So we want new board members coming on to be able to have an opportunity to weigh in on what direction they want to go.
Cool.
So, it could be May of next year, could be fall of next year. Could be another high school bond, could be something different. I don't know yet. But we're definitely considering our options, given that all of our buildings are past their shelf life. And, you talk about things like heating and air conditioning. And, I get down to the nitty gritty, like, hey, like they don't even make the parts for some of the things that are in our buildings anymore. So when you like think about a large boiler system that goes down, which had happened this year at Colonel Wright.
Wow.
They were without, and happened in the winter, and they were without heat for almost over a week.
Wow.
And we had to bring in lots of, space heaters and different things. But then the electrical system doesn't support all of the heaters being plugged in at once, right? So you just have to really navigate those different situations. And what I will say is we have just such an amazing top-notch maintenance team that's super knowledgeable about our buildings and figure out where to get the replacement part. And sometimes they're driving down to Portland in the pouring rain or snow to get the part. And they just work really hard to keep our buildings in really great shape. And I think sometimes when I hear criticism of like, well, you don't even maintain your buildings. Well, actually, yes, we do.
There's a whole bunch.
The fact that our buildings in their current age and state are still well functioning where we can have school, I think
really
speaks to like we are taking care of our buildings. We just recently refurbished all of our roofs. Thanks to our contract with Sodexo, they came in with $500,000 and helped us to redo all of our, not replace all of our roofs, but basically make sure that all of our roofs were leak-proof, sealed.
That's cool.
Really well. Sodexo also came in and replaced the whole fire alarm system at Chenoweth Elementary School. That was another $500,000 they came in and helped us with. So having a good partnership with Sodexo is super helpful because they're helping us. When the first Google Tax Center came online, we currently get about $240,000 a year from that. And the board set up a fund where that money goes directly into that fund to go directly back into our buildings. So it all goes back to improvement of our buildings and keeping them in good functioning.
We could buy half a fire alarm system. That's great.
Yes. Or you can replace half a roof.
Half a roof, It's only the other half. But
a roof replacement, we did get a quote on a roof replacement. It was like almost $1 million. It's like crazy. A lot of money. But what I will say is we are taking advantage of every opportunity we can to apply. When there's grants available, we apply. We have successfully applied now for 2 seismic grants. We had a seismic grant for the Dalles High School, so we were able to complete the Kurtz Gym seismic rehabilitation. And now we just are successfully awarded for Chenoweth. So we are completing the seismic rehabilitation of the gym. They're going to get a whole brand new office building, and we're getting a brand new secure entryway, which is going to be fantastic.
Very needed.
Yeah. So, we work hard every day to keep our buildings in good functioning a good functioning capacity so that kids and adults can come and be there and learn every day, and teachers can teach, and everyone is comfortable or as comfortable as we can make them.
Yeah.
We don't have the only building in our district with school-wide air conditioning is the Dalles Middle School. Everywhere else has some parts are air conditioned, some aren't. When it gets really hot, that's rough.
Yeah.
Because temps can get really high in those classrooms, and that's hard on kids and teachers to learn and teach in that environment.
Yeah.
Also, I think we do the best we can to create 21st century learning environments within the walls of our antiquated buildings. But I just think about our kids, and I think they deserve learning environments that really are reflective of the 21st century.
Yeah, and different challenges, right? We talked about the learning challenges, and those are huge, right? And those needs are not going anywhere, right? And then we can talk about security challenges, right? And the
safety piece is huge.
Yeah, and if I lose sleep at night over anything, it's that, right? And it's less of it's not something that we faced 20 years ago, right? It wasn't something we faced when this district designed these buildings, right? It's not when we renovated them. It's such a recent, it feels like such a recent development. I think we're, not quite recent anymore is not the right term, but in regards to the age of the building, it's a recent becomes a relevant term, right? And so I love that you're doing new entryway into Chenoweth and things like that. That's a big deal. That's, that is about security, right?
Like a secure entryway where office staff will be able to visually see who's at the door. There's going to be an intercom system. They'll get to greet them and ask them hey, how are you? Yeah. What can we help you with? And then also buzz them in. A very secure system to keep our kids safe and keep our staff safe. And
and basics. They're basic systems, right? This is not laser beams, right? This is just super basic intercom. This is 1990s technology, intercom system, right? 1980s probably. So, there's that. I mean, go back to the heating conversation, just to paint a picture, an audio picture of what we're looking at there at the high school is the only one that I've seen. When they made the high school in 1938, right, they did a redundant system, which means that they put 2 boilers into the same building, and they were so big, they had to put the boilers in and then build a building around them both. So there's no getting them out at this point. They're stuck in there. And the first one collapsed in the 50s at some point, and then the second one it started as coal, right? Then it was converted to oil, and then it's converted to gas, right? This thing, you hear my British accent, we gave the world many terrible things, but we also were the train people, right? We invented the trains, and we thought that was cool. This thing is a train end. This is a train, like a giant steam engine from it's a locomotive, right? And it's enormous. This thing, it's as bigger than this room, and it's been converted 3 times, right? And they stopped selling these parts in the 70s, right? And they've all been got rid of across the world. It's not like they're sitting in any pick and pull scrap yards because they're so big you can't move them to the scrap yard to do the thing. So it's not like having a car from the 40s that maybe you can't really get that part because there's a scrap yard somewhere where someone could pull it off the scrap yard. This is a situation where there's another opportunity, right?
There's no scrap yard.
There's no scrap yard with this thing, with these buildings, with these heating systems in, and they're not cooling systems either. These are just heating systems, and as you'll see, if you go to the Dallas High School, they're either on or they're off. And if they're on, don't touch the radiators because they'll burn you, right? Like, and I'm not, this is something that's not quite that hot, but it's very close, right? And so we would love to control that temperature. I'm sure that would be delightful. It's not that you guys don't want to control the temperature. It's just that it's either on or off, right?
Well, and not to mention, like, if you want the building heated, it's not like a flip the switch on the boiler and it instantly heats. We actually have to turn the boilers on a few days ahead of when we forecast super cold weather. So we actually, like, you have to be keeping an eye, which is crazy. You have to be keeping an eye on the weather.
I'm sorry for laughing. It's just so ridiculous.
This is literally what it is.
Yeah.
When winter approaches, like, we are constantly monitoring the weather because we know that at the high school, we actually have to turn those boilers on a few days in advance of the cold weather coming.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
It's crazy.
You don't just get to hit the switch and boom, heat. That's not how it works.
It doesn't, the building is also made of stone and concrete and stuff, so it doesn't actually cool down as fast as you switch it off. It still takes a few days to cool down. And we live in a world where some days it's hot and then some days it's kind of cold. And so even when you've got it on, you have to also forecast the cold weather, the cold or the warm coming too, to be able to switch off and so everybody doesn't overheat.
Yeah. Also, part of the bond process means one of the things we are required to have is our long-range facilities plan.
Yeah.
So we actually have, so I'm not sure if many people are aware, but the Oregon Department of Education established that their facilities department or side of the house is going to visit every school district in the state of Oregon and help assess all their buildings. And somehow we got moved up in the priority list. So they're actually coming in June to visit all our buildings and do the assessments. They also do the ADA compliance, which, as we all know, there's some ADA accessibility issues in all of our
They passed ADA legislation in 1991 in this country.
Yeah. I mean, and we have students in wheelchairs where the high school gets complicated.
Yeah, very complicated.
For them. And we have to work out very, like, specifically designed schedules to make sure that they get their education. It's crazy.
And it's still a long way from perfect for them.
Long way from perfect.
Yeah.
But we're looking forward to their visit in June to help kick off getting our long range facilities plan in place and have that done.
Yeah.
So that when we are ready to go out for a bond, we have all the boxes checked.
Yeah. The history in the Dalles also, people tell me, I wasn't here at this point, when the middle school happened, the bond wouldn't pass. And we ended up with students in an old store, an old like food store or something for a while in between while the building was being built. And obviously I'm misquoting and I'm sure I'll get a whole bunch of bad comments around that, which I'm sure I deserve. But the truth is that like there's a need to pass this bond before it gets to a point where that building becomes condemned for another reason, right? And we've talked.
Because where am I going to put 800 kids?
Not here. I'm
not sure that there's a vacant building sitting around.
I don't think there is, right? I don't think there is a spot for them, and so and I'm glad that we have some flexibility around, some of the materials in the walls and things like that. My grandfather died of asbestos poisoning, right? It's not an uncommon thing, and this to interact with us on that, and we should be protecting our children from things we know that are harmful to them. It seems super
100%.
Simple, for sure. Yeah. And
seems like a no-brainer.
It seems like a no-brainer. The cost is high, right? Though, and it's really hard to stomach for folks.
And I completely understand that and I empathize with that. I get it.
Yeah.
Also, I just think about we should all want to invest in the future of our kids.
Yes, we should.
Because that's our future.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's their future.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I always think of I get like price sensitivity, that's a thing, that's a real thing, and I empathize with that. And I always think of like the greater good, right?
Yeah.
We want to all pull together for the greater good, which is our kids.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's some things on the horizon. So, urban renewals is going to disappear. It's finished. I think, in 2027 or something. And so that hopefully may open up some opportunity because we can't tax the feedback is that people are at the top of their tax tolerance, and that's one of the reasons that we're having the conversation. And so one of the things that people would love to budget is to move things around and keep the taxes the same, and maybe Urban Renewal will offer that to us of some description. It won't be the same for the whole city, right? Because we have the two districts and the two different taxing districts and things. But there's I see some hope in that kind of tax capacity, that there's some things falling off, here, and so hopefully we can use this opportunity to build the next generation of schools, of which we don't just need a high school, right? We ran a high school bond, and I ran a bond last 2 years ago, and it wasn't just the high school was the most what seemed like one of the most pressing issues, and also one of the most impactful projects, right?
Yes.
And that's the reason they went for it. But it was by no means the only project that needed to be done.
No.
Right.
No.
And
I mean, all three of our elementary schools need to be replaced.
Yeah, they do.
But, I think one thing to say about bonds is if we can just get one past the finish line, it really will set us up for future success, because you will be able to refinance those bonds and take those proceeds without raising people's tax level any higher and build more schools.
Yeah.
But we got to get one across the finish line.
Yeah.
And what that is, I don't know yet. So we'll just have to see what speaks to the community this next go around.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming.
Absolutely.
Being on the CCCNews Podcast. It's really a pleasure to hear all of these awesome details in much more rounded ways than what we tend to get.
Absolutely. I'm happy to come back anytime.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Bernal.
Thank you.
Hey, Robin, I just did a story this morning about my daughter who's hiking the PCT.
That's special. I love that.
Yeah, and she's a 2019 grad of the Dallas High School, and she's doing this kind of awesome thing, and I'm so proud of her. But also at the same time, I really enjoy bringing local news to folks and bringing relevant information.
That's really evident from your work, Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the internet is full of misinformation or poor quality information or AI produced information. And here we have something different at CCC News, right? We're local people generating local content with journalistic integrity and trying to build trust with our audience, because that's what they deserve, right?
Right. And so how does that benefit our advertisers?
Well, being seen next to content that's really relevant, that's really trustworthy and really credible, adds credibility to our advertisers, because our viewers and readers see those advertisers next to that really honest, credible local information, and it really builds that brand into a basis of trust and really helps businesses reach people from that basis of trust.
Yeah, awesome. And boy, and to all those folks who are supporting us, it makes a huge difference in us being able to get this job done of keeping folks informed of what's happening in local government, entertainment, all sorts of venues throughout the Gorge.
Yeah, we have really high integrity in our journalistic standards, and so you're always verifying all this information constantly with multiple sources of people. We don't try not to do one source stories here, or just take a piece of information from the government and run with it. We really try and drill down and get to the meat and potatoes of what's there.
That's the joy. Yeah.
That's great. Well, if you want to keep reading, go to CCCnews.com. And if you want to support us, look for our supporters tab there. And really grateful for any support that people can make. Yeah. The more support we get from our local audience, the less we have to rely on advertisers, and the more journalistic freedom we get.
Yeah, absolutely. And those interested in advertising can always reach out to me at tom@cccnews.com, or call me at 541-980-2756.
Great. Thanks, Tom.
You bet.